The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as Ambassador Hyun-woo of the Zephyrian Empire walked through the wide corridors carrying a datapad that would change everything. His 6 legs clicked against the polished floor while his 4 eyes scanned the report one more time. The humans were coming, and nobody knew what to expect. Ji-hai stood at her observation post in the xenobiology section, watching the main chamber fill with representatives from across the galaxy. Her blue skin showed the stress patterns that her species displayed when worried. As the Council's chief xenobiologist, she had studied every known intelligent species for the past 40 years. None of them had prepared her for what the humans might bring. The data was impossible to believe. These creatures from the 3rd planet of a small yellow star had achieved faster-than-light travel in just 50 years after splitting the atom. Every other species in the galaxy had taken thousands of years to make that same leap. The Zephyrians needed 3,000 years, the Aquarians took 5,000, and even the brilliant crystalline collective required 2,000 years of careful development. But humans did it in 50 years. The report said they called their methods spite, coffee, and pure stubbornness, whatever those words meant. Captain Tae-min stood on the bridge of the UES horizon as his ship dropped out of hyperspace near the Council station. The massive structure looked like a city floating in space, with towers and domes connected by bridges that sparkled with energy fields. His crew had been preparing for this moment for months, but Tae-min felt surprisingly calm. "Captain," said So-young from her engineering, "station. Their technology is interesting but seems pretty basic. Want me to offer them some upgrades?" Tae-min smiled. So-young was the best engineer in the human fleet, and she had a habit of trying to fix everything she saw. "Let's see what they have to say first, but keep those upgrade plans ready." Wu Jin, their diplomat, was already reviewing the cultural files they had received. "The translations seem good, but I think they're being very formal. Maybe we should bring some of those barbecue ribs from the food storage." "Good idea," said Tae-min. "Nothing breaks ice like good food." In the council chambers, Veltar, the insectoid representative, clicked his mandibles nervously. His species had been part of the council for 800 years, and he had never seen the leadership so worried about a first contact. Usually, new species were brought in slowly, with years of careful observation and gradual introduction to galactic society, but the humans had appeared suddenly, their ships detected near the outer systems just 6 months ago. When the Council sent peaceful contact signals, the humans had responded immediately with enthusiasm and an invitation to come over for dinner and technical discussions. Zephnos, the crystalline being who served as the Council's military advisor, resonated at a frequency that showed deep concern. His species communicated through harmonic vibrations, and right now he was practically singing a song of worry. The human ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to be built with a combination of advanced technology and what could only be described as creative madness. The airlock hissed open, and Captain Tae-min stepped into the council station, followed by his crew. The artificial gravity felt a little light compared to Earth normal, but they adjusted quickly. A delegation of various alien species waited for them in the reception area. "Welcome to the Galactic Council Station," said a tall, thin being with gray skin and large black eyes. "I am Ambassador Krelnog of the Council Diplomatic Corps. We are honored by your presence." Tae-min grinned and extended his hand. "Captain Tae-min of the United Earth Fleet. Great to meet you. We brought barbecue and some technical manuals in case anyone wants to see our new quantum drive design." The silence that followed was not the respectful pause the humans expected. Ambassador Krelnog's translator seemed to be working overtime, making small clicking sounds as it processed the unexpected words. "You brought food?" asked Krelnog. "Sure," said So-young, stepping forward, "with a large container. We figured you might be hungry after all the formal stuff. Also, I noticed your fusion reactors are using an outdated containment system. Want me to show you how to upgrade them? Should increase efficiency by about 40%. More silence. Ji-Hai, watching from her observation post, felt her stress patterns intensify. The humans were treating this first contact like a casual neighborhood visit. Wu Jin opened his diplomatic case and pulled out a stack of documents. We also have some information about those Void Hunter ships we detected near the Outer Rim. Nasty-looking things, but their armor has some obvious weak points. Want to see our analysis? Veltar's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. The Void Hunters were the galaxy's most closely guarded secret, a threat that the Council had been fighting, in shadow for 3 centuries. How did the humans already know about them? You are aware of the Void Hunters? Asked Zephnos, his harmonic voice carrying notes of disbelief. Oh yeah, said Taemin casually. We ran into a few of their scouts last month. Creepy ships, but their tactics are pretty predictable once you figure out their pattern. We chased them off without much trouble. The Council delegation exchanged looks that needed no translation. These humans had encountered Void Hunters and survived. More than survived, they had driven them away and analyzed their weaknesses. Ambassador Hyun Woo finally found his voice. Perhaps we should move to the formal meeting chamber. There is much to discuss. As they walked through the station corridors, So Young kept pointing at various systems and offering suggestions. That power coupling could be more efficient. Oh, and your artificial gravity generators are working way too hard. We could show you a simpler design. The formal meeting chamber was designed to impress new species with the glory and power of the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in a great circle, their various forms creating a display of the galaxy's diversity. Taemin looked around with interest. Wow, this is incredible. So many different species working together. That's exactly what we hope to find out here. He sat down at the designated spot and gestured for his crew to join him. So Young immediately pulled out her technical pad and started sketching improvements to the chamber's lighting system. Wu Jin began organizing his diplomatic materials with the enthusiasm of someone preparing for a friendly discussion rather than a formal first contact. Captain Taemin, began the council speaker, a massive being whose species was known for their formal ceremonies. We welcome humanity to the galactic community. It is customary for new species to undergo a period of observation and gradual integration. That sounds great, said Taemin. But first, want to see what we learned about those Void Hunter ships? We think they might be planning something big, and we'd love to help you deal with them. The chamber fell silent again. Ji-Hai realized that her species' stress patterns were now visible to anyone who looked at her. The humans were not just unafraid. Of the galaxy's greatest threat, they were offering to help fight it as if it were a minor problem. Wu Jin spread out his documents. We've also got some ideas about improving trade routes and resource sharing. Oh, and we brought a proposal for a joint research program. Humans are really good at solving problems when we work together. Council's speaker looked at the documents with growing alarm. These were not the careful, hesitant proposals of a new species seeking to find their place in galactic society. These were the confident plans of a species that saw themselves as partners rather than supplicants. We also brought entertainment, added So Young cheerfully. Anyone want to see videos of human music? We've got everything from classical symphonies to something called heavy metal. The meeting that was supposed to last several hours to establish basic communication protocols had turned into something unprecedented. The humans were not seeking permission to join galactic civilization. They were offering to improve it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at the highest level of secrecy. Nari, the Council's chief war strategist, stood before the assembled representatives with data that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, diplomacy, and intelligent life itself. What we are dealing with, Nari began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, is a species that approaches conflict in ways we have never encountered. They call their military doctrine aggressive diplomacy and tactical friendship. The holographic display showed recordings from human military exercises. Ships moved in formations that seemed random until the observers realized they were spelling out messages in Galactic Standard script. The messages read things like, "Want to be friends?" and "We brought snacks." Mordek, the heavily armored representative of the Thexian warrior culture, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His species had conquered 12 systems through pure military might, but the human approach made no sense to him. How do they achieve victory through friendship? That is the problem, said Nari. They do not seek victory in the traditional sense. They seek what they call mutually beneficial outcomes. When faced with hostile forces, their first response is to ask why the enemy is angry and whether they can help solve the underlying problem. The display changed to show footage from the Q, Outer Rim systems. Human vessels had been spotted near Void Hunter territory, but they were not running or hiding. Instead, they appeared to be conducting what their reports called aggressive exploration and seeing if anyone needs help out. There. Ji-Hai raised her hand from the xenobiology section. Our analysis of their psychology shows that humans have a fundamental inability to accept unsolvable problems. When presented with a challenge that has defeated other species for centuries, their response is to treat it as an interesting puzzle. This is confirmed by recent events, added Mordek grimly. 3 days ago, a human exploration vessel encountered a Void Hunter patrol. Instead of retreating, they broadcast a message, offering to share their maps of safe travel routes. The chamber buzzed with alarm. Void Hunters were the galaxy's most feared enemy, creatures of pure malevolence that had been slowly consuming systems at the galaxy's edge for 300 years. No species had ever tried to communicate with them, and certainly no one had ever offered them assistance. Chang Ho, a human cultural attaché who had somehow obtained clearance to attend the meeting, raised his hand politely. The fact that he was present at all was causing stress among the security staff, but his credentials appeared to be legitimate, even if no one could figure out who had authorized them. "Excuse me?" Chang Ho said with a cheerful smile. "But why? Haven't you just asked for help with the Void Hunter problem? Humans are really good at solving problems when we work together." The silence that followed was so complete that the station's air recycling systems seemed loud by comparison. Chang Ho looked around the chamber with genuine confusion, as if he had asked about the weather. "The Void Hunters," said Council Speaker slowly, "are not a problem to be solved. They are a force of nature, like a cosmic storm or a dying star." "Oh," said Chang Ho, pulling out a small data pad. "Well, according to our preliminary analysis, they're actually pretty predictable. Their ships follow standard tactical patterns, and their technology seems to be based on some kind of biomechanical hybrid system. My colleague Dong Hyun thinks he could design countermeasures in about a week." Jin A, the Council's intelligence officer, had been studying the human files for weeks, and what she had discovered was more disturbing than any military threat. She stood up slowly, her tentacles curling with nervous energy. "The real issue," Jin A said, "is not their technology or their military capabilities. The real issue is their approach to problem solving. They do not see warfare as conquest or survival. They see it as engineering." The display showed footage from a human military briefing, when presented with video of a Void Hunter dreadnought that had destroyed an entire council fleet. The human engineer Dong Hyun had calmly calculated its structural weaknesses and sketched improvements to council weapons on what appeared to be a piece of napkin. "Furthermore," continued Jin A, "their military philosophy is based on a principle they call overwhelming kindness. They believe that most conflicts arise from misunderstandings or unmet needs, and their solution is to address those needs more effectively than their enemies can." Chang Ho nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Like, if someone is attacking you because they need resources, you find a way to get them better resources. If they're attacking because they're scared, you help them feel safe. If they're attacking because they're just mean, well, then you stop them, but you still try to understand why they became mean in the first place. The concept was so alien to galactic military thinking that several representatives needed to have their translators recalibrated. The idea of defeating enemies by solving their problems was not just unprecedented, it was incomprehensible. Veltar clicked his mandibles in a pattern that indicated deep confusion. But what if the enemy cannot be reasoned with? What if they exist only to destroy? Then you protect the innocent people and stop the bad guys, said Chang Ho, as if explaining something obvious to a child. But you still try to figure out what made them that way, because maybe you can prevent it from happening again. Nari brought up the next set of files, and the stress levels in the chamber reached new heights. The humans have been conducting what they call proactive peacekeeping missions throughout the galaxy. They have solved resource conflicts by developing new extraction methods, resolved territorial disputes by finding better planets for colonization, and ended 3 separate wars by introducing the opposing sides to something called competitive cooking. The Aquarian representative, whose species had been involved in one of those conflicts, spoke up reluctantly. The humans appeared during our conflict with the Dryworlders over water rights. Instead of taking sides, they taught both species new purification techniques that made the water dispute irrelevant. They called it a fun chemistry problem. The same pattern appears everywhere they go, said Jin'ei. They do not seek to dominate or control. They seek to optimize. They look at existing systems and immediately begin thinking of ways to improve them. Chang Ho was taking notes on his data pad, occasionally looking up with interest. These are great examples. We should probably send some agricultural specialists to help with those farming issues on Kepler 442. Oh, and that trade route problem could be solved with some better navigation computers. The fact that a human was sitting in their most secure meeting, cheerfully offering solutions to problems that had plagued various species for decades, was perhaps the best illustration of what they were dealing with. Zephnos resonated at a frequency that conveyed profound unease. The pattern suggests that humans are incapable of accepting the status quo. They see everything as improvable. Which brings us to the core problem, said Nari. Every species in this council achieved spaceflight as a response to crisis. We fled dying worlds, escaped enemies, or sought resources. Our technology developed from necessity and desperation. The display showed the technological development curves of various species, all following similar patterns of gradual advancement driven by external pressures. Humans achieved spaceflight because they were curious about what was out there. Their technology developed from imagination and optimism. This fundamental difference in motivation makes them incomprehensible to us. Chang Ho looked up from his notes. Wait, you guys got into space because you had to? That sounds really stressful. We got into space because it looked fun, and we wanted to meet aliens and see cool stuff. The innocent confusion in his voice was more terrifying than any battle cry. Here was a species that had developed galaxy-spanning technology not from desperation or aggression, but from enthusiasm and wonder. There is more, said Jin'ei grimly. Our psychological analysis suggests that humans possess what they call terminal optimism. They appear to be physically incapable of believing that a situation cannot be improved. Well, yeah, said Chang Ho. I mean, there's always something you can do to make things better, right? Maybe it takes a while to figure out, but that just makes it a more interesting problem. Council speaker looked around the chamber at the faces of dozens of species, all showing various expressions of the same emotion, fear. Not fear of human weapons or human aggression, but fear of human helpfulness. The question before us, said Council speaker slowly, is whether the galaxy is ready for a species that sees every problem as solvable and every conflict as a misunderstanding waiting to be resolved. Chang Ho raised his hand again. If it helps, we brought coffee and some really good cookies. Problem solving is always easier with snacks. Council Speaker Yorgash had lived for 400 years and had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, but he had never been forced to call for a vote like Resolution 2847. The complete prohibition of formal alliances with humanity was unprecedented in council history, and the debate had been raging for 3 days. Mi Young sat in the observer section, officially representing humanity's interests, though she wondered if anyone truly understood what those interests were. As the Council's first human cultural liaison, she had been trying to explain her species to beings who found them incomprehensible, and the task was proving more difficult than anyone had anticipated. "The motion before us," announced Yorgash, "is not born of hatred or fear of conquest. It is born of a deeper concern about the fundamental incompatibility between human nature and galactic stability." The Aquarian delegate, Neshaval, stood to address the chamber. Her species' translucent blue skin showed the stress patterns that had become common during the human discussions. 3 months ago, our species presented the humans with our greatest challenge, the purification of our homeworld's contaminated water systems. This crisis had consumed our resources and scientific efforts for over 1,000 years. She paused, her stress patterns deepening. The human engineer So Young solved it in one afternoon. She called it a fun chemistry problem and expressed surprise that we had not tried what she called basic filtration techniques. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Aquarian water crisis was legendary throughout the galaxy, a problem so complex that entire universities had been built around studying it. "But that is not the concerning part," continued Neshaval. "The concerning part is that when we offered to pay her for this solution that saved our civilization, she asked if we had any other chemistry problems she could look at. She seemed disappointed that we only had one." The Zarathi representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with colors that indicated deep philosophical distress. "The humans have made our entire religious hierarchy obsolete by asking questions that our theologians call simple, but cannot answer." Mi Young shifted uncomfortably. She remembered when her colleague Wu Jin had attended a Zarathi religious ceremony and had innocently asked why their creation myth required so many steps when the universe seemed designed for efficiency. The theological crisis that followed was still ongoing. "Human philosophy is not complex," the Zarathi continued. "It is devastatingly simple. They approach our most profound spiritual questions with practical curiosity, and their answers make our centuries of religious scholarship seem unnecessarily complicated." Veltar clicked his mandibles in the pattern that indicated resigned defeat. "My species has prided itself on our military precision for 800 years. We have developed tactics that are studied throughout the galaxy as examples of strategic perfection." The insectoid paused, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that suggested embarrassment. "Last week, the human Captain Taemin reviewed our defensive strategies and asked why we made them so complicated when the enemy could simply be asked to stop fighting and offered better alternatives. When we explained that enemies do not simply stop fighting when asked, he suggested that we were not asking correctly and offered to demonstrate proper technique." The chamber buzzed with the alien equivalent of nervous laughter. Everyone had heard about Captain Taemin's demonstration, where he had ended a centuries-old border dispute by introducing both sides to what he called cooperative sandcastle building. But the mood changed when the emergency communication system activated. Captain Jun Ho of the Human Exploration Vessel Determination appeared on the main display, broadcasting from what appeared to be the middle of Void Hunter space. "Hey there, council folks," said Jun Ho with the casual tone of someone calling to report a minor traffic delay. "Hope we're not interrupting anything important. We're currently in Sector 7 Alpha, having a chat with what I think you call the Void Hunters." The silence that followed was so complete that Mi Young could hear her own heartbeat. Void Hunter space was considered absolutely forbidden territory, a realm of death where no ship had ever returned. Anyway, continued Junho, we brought pizza and antimatter torpedoes, figured that covered most negotiation scenarios. These tentacle guys seem pretty upset about something, but we think it's just a communication problem. The display showed the Bridge of the Determination, where human crew members were working calmly while massive, nightmare-inducing Void Hunter ships loomed in the background. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were visible through the viewports, their writhing forms and glowing eyes exactly as horrifying as the Council's worst intelligence reports had described. They keep making these weird, psychic attacks that feel kind of like a bad Monday morning, so we've been playing music to help them feel better. Turns out they really like jazz. Who knew? Junho turned to someone off-screen. What's that, So Young? Oh, right. We've also figured out some design flaws in their ships. Want us to offer them upgrades? Seems rude not to help. Council speaker. Yorgash found his voice first. Captain Junho, you are in extreme danger. The Void Hunters are not capable of communication or negotiation. Well, that's what we thought too, said Junho cheerfully. But it turns out they're just really angry about something that happened about 3,000 years ago. We're still working out the details, but I think it involves a misunderstanding about cosmic background radiation. The transmission continued for several more minutes, with Junho providing updates on what he called the tentacle situation, while his crew apparently conducted diplomatic negotiations with beings that were supposed to be the incarnation of cosmic horror. When the transmission ended, the chamber remained silent for a full minute. Finally, Kyung-soo, humanity's chief diplomat, stood up slowly. His presence in the chamber had been controversial, but his credentials were impeccable, even if his methods were unconventional. I understand the Council's concerns, Kyung-soo said calmly. Humanity does tend to approach problems differently than other species. If you feel that formal alliances would be problematic, we respect that decision. The simplicity of his response was somehow more alarming than any argument could have been. He was not protesting the prohibition or threatening consequences. He was treating it like a minor administrative detail. However, continued Kyung-soo, I should mention that we will continue to help with the Void Hunter situation. It seems like the kind of problem that should be solved regardless of alliance status. Yorgash realized that this was the moment that would define the future of galactic civilization. Captain Kyung-soo, are you saying that humanity intends to resolve the Void Hunter crisis independently? Oh, we're not doing it independently, said Kyung-soo with a smile that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. We've already gotten help from the Aquarians with some water-based cooling systems. The Zerathi have been great with energy modulation, and the Thexians provided some excellent strategic advice once we explained what we were trying to do. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. While the Council had been debating whether to allow formal alliances with humanity, the humans had been building informal partnerships with individual species. They had not waited for permission or official sanction. They had simply started solving problems and invited others to help. The prohibition on formal alliances, continued Kyung-soo, does not affect our ability to be good neighbors and helpful friends. We understand that bureaucracy takes time, so we will just continue working on the various problems we have identified while you sort out the paperwork. Mi-young watched the faces of the Council representatives as they realized what had happened. The prohibition they were about to vote on was meaningless. Humanity was not seeking to join the galactic power structure. They were ignoring it entirely and building something new. Besides, added Kyung-soo, once we get the Void Hunter situation resolved, there are several other issues we have noticed that could use attention. The trade route inefficiencies, the resource distribution problems, and what appears to be a serious case of interspecies communication difficulties. The vote on Resolution 2847 passed unanimously, but as the representatives filed out of the chamber, Mi-young noticed that many of them were not celebrating. They looked like beings who had just realized that they had voted to exclude themselves from something important. Kyung-soo packed his materials quietly, whistling a tune that Mi-young recognized as an old human song about making friends. When Yorgash approached him after the session, the council speaker's expression was troubled. "Captain Kyung-soo," said Yorgash, "what will humanity do now?" Kyung-soo looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "The same thing we were always going to do. Help people, solve problems, and try to make things better for everyone. Why would that change?" As he walked away, Mi-young heard him humming the same tune, and she realized that the council had made a fundamental error. They had tried to regulate a force of nature, like passing a law against the tide or voting to prohibit the sunrise. Humanity was not going to change course because of a council resolution. They were going to continue being exactly what they had always been. Fleet Admiral Sun Hee stood on the bridge of the UES Persistence, watching her tactical display with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a particularly interesting puzzle. The Void Hunter fleet that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for 3 centuries was retreating, and they were doing it while broadcasting what her xenolinguist assured her were apologies in 17 different languages. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, "the enemy dreadnought is requesting permission to surrender. They're also asking if we have any more of those cookie recipes." Sun Hee smiled. The Battle of Kepler 438 had gone exactly according to plan, which was unusual because her plan had violated every known principle of space combat. Her ships had opened the engagement by broadcasting a formal invitation to peace talks, followed immediately by a demonstration of what human weapons could do when powered by what her engineers called aggressive friendship. The Void Hunter ships, accustomed to causing terror and despair in their enemies, had been confused when the human fleet responded to their fear-inducing psychic attacks by playing increasingly loud music and broadcasting messages of encouragement to each other. "Sir, the enemy commander is requesting a direct communication channel," added the communications officer. "They want to speak with whoever designed our psychological defense systems." "Tell them that would be Ensign Park from Recreation Services," said Sun Hee. She suggested the music playlist. "Also ask if they need medical assistance or emergency supplies." The transformation of the Void Hunters from cosmic horror to confused refugees seeking guidance had taken approximately 6 hours, of what Sun Hee called aggressive diplomacy. Her fleet had used ramming attacks with FTL drives, deployed weapons that sang opera while firing, and broadcast surrender terms in 47,000 languages, including several that the Void Hunters had not invented yet. On the planet below, Dr. Haewon was conducting interviews with captured Void Hunter personnel, and her findings were revolutionizing galactic understanding of xenopsychology. Her paper, titled "Why Cosmic Horrors Are Just Misunderstood Engineering Projects," had become required reading in council universities despite the official prohibition on human alliances. The key insight, Haewon explained to her research team, is that the Void Hunters are not actually malevolent. They are deeply traumatized. Their entire species has been suffering from what we would call collective post-traumatic stress disorder for approximately 3,000 years. The Void Hunter she was interviewing, a creature that resembled a combination of squid and nightmare, made sounds that the translator rendered as grateful sobbing. According to their historical records, continued Haewon, their homeworld was destroyed by a cosmic event that they interpreted as punishment for their scientific curiosity. They have been lashing out at other species because they believe that advanced civilization inevitably leads to cosmic destruction. She gestured to the holographic display showing Void Hunter neural patterns. They attack not because they are evil, but because they are trying to prevent other species from reaching the technological level that they believe triggers cosmic annihilation. In their minds, they are saving the galaxy by destroying advanced civilizations. Her human colleagues nodded with understanding, but the council observers who had been permitted to witness the research looked disturbed. The idea that the galaxy's greatest threat was motivated by misguided altruism was somehow more unsettling than simple malevolence. "The treatment protocol is surprisingly straightforward," said Haewon. cognitive therapy, group counseling, and what we call constructive project engagement. Give them something positive to build instead of something to destroy, and their psychological profiles show remarkable improvement. Meanwhile, Yoon Seo, serving as a covert council observer embedded with the human fleet, was sending reports that challenged everything the galactic military establishment thought they knew about warfare. "The humans are winning," she reported in her encrypted transmission to Council headquarters, "not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through what they call tactical empathy. They study their enemies not to exploit weaknesses, but to understand motivations." Her report included footage of human crews responding to Void Hunter fear-based psychic attacks by offering emotional support and suggesting breathing exercises. The sight of hardened space marines conducting group therapy sessions with tentacled horrors while under fire had broken several conceptual frameworks that military strategists had considered fundamental. "Furthermore," continued Yoon Seo, "they have converted the Void Hunter crisis from an existential threat to what they refer to as a really expensive team-building exercise. They are treating galactic warfare as an opportunity for species-wide psychological intervention." Council Military Advisor Bektar reviewed Yoon Seo's reports with growing alarm. His species had been professional soldiers for 8,000 years, and the human approach to combat made no sense within any traditional framework. "They are winning battles by convincing the enemy to seek therapy," he reported to the emergency session. "Their primary weapon appears to be aggressive compassion, backed up by frighteningly effective conventional firepower." The tactical recordings showed human ships broadcasting messages like, "We understand you're angry, but have you considered talking about your feelings instead of shooting?" while simultaneously demonstrating weapons capabilities that could vaporize small moons. "The psychological impact on enemy forces is unprecedented," continued Bektar. "Void Hunter crews are surrendering not out of fear but out of hope. They believe the humans can actually help them resolve their civilizational trauma." Back in the combat zone, Captain Jun Ho was conducting what he called diplomatic bombing runs on Void Hunter positions. His ship, the Determination, would approach enemy installations while broadcasting offers of humanitarian aid and technical assistance. "This is Captain Jun Ho to Void Hunter Command," he transmitted during the siege of their main staging area. "We have medical supplies, counseling services, and really good coffee. Also, our engineers noticed some structural problems with your base design. Want us to fix those after you surrender?" The response came in the form of confused psychic emanations that his translator interpreted as, "Are you actually offering to improve our fortifications while attacking them?" "Well, yeah," replied Jun Ho. "Just because we're in conflict doesn't mean we can't help you build better stuff. Quality construction is important regardless of political differences." The siege ended 3 hours later when the Void Hunter commanders requested a formal meeting to discuss construction standards and emotional wellness protocols. Dr. Hei-Wan's research had revealed that the Void Hunters possessed advanced biotechnology that could be incredibly beneficial if redirected toward constructive purposes. Their ability to manipulate organic matter and interface directly with biological systems made them natural partners for medical research and environmental restoration. "The irony," she explained in her latest report, "is that their technology is perfectly suited for healing rather than destruction. They have been using advanced medical knowledge to cause psychological trauma when they could be using it to cure diseases and restore damaged ecosystems." The first joint human Void Hunter research project involved cleaning up the environmental damage from 300 years of warfare. Void Hunter biotechnology proved remarkably effective at repairing radiation damage and restoring dead worlds to habitability. "It turns out," reported project coordinator Min-Soo, "that helping people rebuild their homes is much more psychologically satisfying than destroying them. Who would have thought?" The Council's secret monitoring stations recorded the impossible. Sight of human and Void Hunter crews working together to construct humanitarian aid stations throughout the former war zone. The creatures that had been the galaxy's nightmare were now enthusiastically participating in what the humans called aggressive infrastructure development. Yunseo's final report to the Council was brief, but devastating in its implications. The humans have not defeated the Void Hunters, they have recruited them. The galaxy's greatest threat has become humanity's newest ally, and they accomplished this transformation by treating warfare as group therapy conducted with high explosives. The strategic implications were staggering. If humans could convert the Void Hunters from enemies to partners, what did that mean for every other conflict in the galaxy? What did it mean for the balance of power that had maintained galactic civilization for millennia? But the most disturbing aspect of the human victory was not their success, but their attitude about it. They treated the resolution of a 3-century war as a routine problem-solving exercise, no more significant than fixing a broken navigation system or organizing a more efficient supply chain. When asked about their achievement, Fleet Admiral Sun He had simply shrugged and said, "It wasn't that hard once we figured out what was really bothering them." Most problems are like that. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics. It was their fundamental inability to accept that any problem was unsolvable or any conflict was permanent. They had turned the Void Hunter War into a case study in interspecies psychology. Seok Jin had been working in the Council's intelligence archives for 6 months, officially cataloging historical records, but actually investigating something far more significant. As a human analyst with unprecedented access to classified galactic history, he had discovered patterns that changed everything. They thought they knew about the prohibition against human alliances. "The Council has been lying," he announced to the emergency session that included both human and Council representatives. "Not maliciously, but they have been lying to themselves about why they fear us." Da-eun, humanities xenocultural specialist, stood beside him with data that supported his conclusions. Her research into the psychological profiles of every spacefaring species had revealed a truth that the Council had buried in their deepest archives. Every species in the Galactic Council achieved interstellar travel as a response to existential crisis, she explained. The Zephyrians fled their dying sun. The Aquarians escaped massive flooding on their homeworld. The Zarathi were driven off their planet by volcanic activity. The holographic display showed the development patterns of dozens of civilizations, all following the same trajectory: catastrophe, desperation, technological breakthrough, expansion into space. "But humans," continued Seok Jin, "achieved spaceflight because we wanted to see what was out there. We developed interstellar travel not from desperation, but from curiosity. This fundamental difference in motivation is what makes us incomprehensible to the Council." Council Speaker Yorgash shifted uncomfortably. The classified files that Seok Jin had uncovered contained psychological evaluations that had been considered too sensitive for general distribution. "The truth," said Da-eun, "is that the Council is not afraid of human aggression or human conquest. They are afraid of human peace." The statement hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy had believed about the nature of conflict and cooperation. "Every Council species views the universe as fundamentally hostile," she continued. "Their entire worldview is based on the assumption that survival requires competition, that resources are scarce, and that other species are potential threats. This is why they achieved spaceflight, why they developed their technologies, and why they formed the Council itself." Seok Jin activated the next set of displays. "Humans developed spaceflight because we thought it would be fun to meet aliens and explore cool places. We developed our technology because we enjoyed solving interesting problems. We approached the galaxy with the assumption that it was full of potential friends." The psychological profiles showed the stark contrast. Council species had developed defensive technologies, territorial instincts, and hierarchical social structures based on the assumption that conflict was inevitable. Humans had developed cooperative technologies, exploratory instincts, and collaborative social structures based on the assumption that working together was more fun than working alone. Chang Ho, who had somehow managed to be present at every important council meeting despite having no official status, raised his hand cheerfully. Is this why everyone gets so worried when we try to help? Because you assume we must want something in return? The simplicity of the question revealed the depth of the cultural divide. For council species, altruism was a strategy that disguised self-interest. For humans, altruism was just the most efficient way to solve problems. The prohibition on human alliances, said Seok Jin, was never about protecting the galaxy from human aggression. It was about protecting the Council's worldview from human optimism. He brought up the classified reports from the first contact scenarios. Every Council species had approached humanity expecting traditional negotiations, territorial agreements, resource-sharing protocols, mutual defense pacts based on common enemies. Instead, humans had offered unrestricted technical assistance, open cultural exchange, and what they called collaborative problem-solving partnerships. They had no concept of zero-sum competition because their entire civilization was built on the assumption that everyone could benefit from cooperation. The Council, explained Da-Un, has been afraid that human philosophy would undermine the assumptions that hold galactic civilization together. If species realized that scarcity and competition were not inevitable, the entire power structure would become obsolete. Captain Minho of the Human Vessel Friendship Initiative had been listening to the presentation with growing understanding. His ship had just arrived from the outer systems, with a crew that included representatives from 47 different species, including what used to be called Void Hunters, but now called themselves the Reformed Collective of Tentacled Philosophers. So you're saying, said Minho, that the whole galaxy has been organized around the idea that everyone has to compete for limited resources, but humans proved that the resources aren't actually limited if you cooperate instead of compete. Precisely, said Seok Jin. Human technology makes scarcity obsolete. Human psychology makes conflict obsolete. Human philosophy makes the current galactic power structure obsolete. The reformed collective representative, a creature that still looked terrifying despite its newfound interest in philosophy, made harmonious sounds that the translator rendered as thoughtful agreement. The humans showed us that our 3,000-year war was based on a false assumption, it said. We believed that technological advancement inevitably led to cosmic destruction, but the humans demonstrated that technology could be used for cosmic construction instead. The implications were staggering. If the Void Hunters could be converted from cosmic horrors to philosophical collaborators, what did that mean for every other inevitable conflict in the galaxy? Council Speaker Yorgash found himself facing the most important decision in galactic history. The chamber was filled with representatives from species that had spent millennia believing that competition and conflict were the natural state of intelligent life. What you are suggesting, he said slowly, is that humanity represents an evolutionary leap not in technology or intelligence, but in social cooperation. Not exactly, said Da-Un gently. We're not more evolved. We just had different experiences that led to different assumptions about how the universe works. Jiwon, a human child who had somehow wandered into the chamber while her mother attended. Diplomatic meetings looked up at the massive alien delegates with innocent curiosity. Why do all the alien people look so worried? She asked her mother, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Her mother, Dr. Yan He, from the Cultural Exchange Program, smiled and knelt down to explain. They're not worried, sweetie, they're just learning that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe is someone who genuinely wants to help. The child's confusion was evident. But why is helping scary? Because, said Yeon-hee, some people have been hurt so many times that they forget what it feels like to be safe. So when someone offers to help them, they think it must be a trick. The conversation between mother and child continued in the background, while the council delegates wrestled with concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of existence. "The question before us," said Yorgash finally, "is whether we are willing to reconsider everything we think we know about the nature of intelligent civilization." Minho gestured to his diverse crew. "If it helps, we brought representatives from species throughout the galaxy. They can tell you about their experiences with human cooperation." The testimonials that followed painted a picture of a galaxy in transition. Species after species described how human involvement had resolved conflicts, solved resource problems, and introduced new possibilities for cooperation that they had never imagined. "The humans," said a Thexian warrior, "taught us that strength could be used for protection instead of conquest. They showed us that the greatest battles are fought against problems, not people." "They solved our water crisis," added an Aquarian scientist, "not because they wanted something from us, but because they thought clean water was something everyone should have. They helped us understand our own religious questions," said a Zarathi philosopher, "by asking us to explain why those questions were important to us." The pattern was consistent across dozens of species and hundreds of interactions. Humans approached every situation with the assumption that cooperation was possible and that everyone's needs could be met through creative problem-solving. Council Speaker Yorgash called for the vote that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Resolution 2847B, the rescission of the prohibition on formal alliances with humanity, with the amendment that all Council species are required to maintain emergency supplies of coffee and barbecue sauce for diplomatic functions. The vote was unanimous, but the real change had already happened. The galaxy had learned that their assumptions about scarcity, competition, and inevitable conflict were not universal truths, but cultural choices. As the session ended, Ji-Wan tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, are we going to be friends with all the aliens now?" "I think so, sweetie," said Yan-He. "It turns out they were always ready to be friends. They just needed someone to show them how." The galaxy was about to discover what was possible when intelligent species worked together instead of against each other. And humanity, with their terminal optimism and aggressive helpfulness,